The most widely published book in human history reveals that we are created in the image of God. Throughout our human journey, each encounter is an opportunity to see the shared humanity in ourselves and others. Regardless of one's views on religion, each experience and each story weaves us together towards a common path. A path of transformation, a process of growth and understanding, a recognition that, at our core, we share a common destiny. What does the search for truth really mean in our lives? How can we find a sense of unity in a world so diverse and divided? As we reflect on these questions, we start to uncover a fundamental connection that binds us all beyond our differences. Welcome to Created in the Image of God, Building Vibrant Communities, with our host, Wade Franson. Tonight's episode is The Gifted Gangster.
Good evening, everyone. It's Wade Franson, Created in the Image of God. I am here with an amazing show. I have a guest here waiting in the studio. We were just catching up and talking about so many things. This guest is amazing, and he has an amazing story. His name is Gunnar Lindbloom, and here's the brief synopsis. From a life entangled in crime to a mission fueled by faith. Gunnar Lindbloom, his journey is nothing short of extraordinary. Once known as an enforcer for the Detroit Mafia, he spent 13 years behind bars, where he not only discovered his gift for writing, but also found the love of his life through thousands of pages of letters. Now he's a best-selling author, an entrepreneur, and an inspirational speaker. Gunnar's story helps us to understand that with God, anything is possible. Let's welcome him in. Welcome, Gunnar.
Hey, thanks for having me. How you doing, Wade?
I'm doing great. And we almost crash landed into the opening of the show because your life is so jam-packed even now with success and challenges and new things. And it's just amazing talking to you. I want the audience, however, to get a glimpse of who you were before all of that started. As we always do on this show, we want a little bit about your own creation story, you know, the path that you were put on as you were brought to this earth, you know, your parents, your family, the circumstances of your very early life. What were your earliest memories, and what was it like growing up as a very young child?
Oh God, I had a horrible, tumultuous childhood, man. Like it was bad. But I won't say as bad as it could get, but pretty close. Like my father was an abusive drunk alcoholic. My mother was mentally ill. You know, by the time I was 3-4 years old, I was seeing my father beat my mother, you know, beat the crap out of her. When he come home drunk from the bar or whatever. And eventually they divorced when I was 4 or 5. I think it was 5. And then I moved in with my grandparents, my grandma and grandpa Toko, who, you know, I didn't know this at the time, but it turns out that they were very closely associated with the mafia. The boss of the Detroit Mafia had for decades had been a guy. First, it was a guy named Vito Toko, Black Bill they call him, and then his son came after him. But anyways, which is their cousins of my grandfather.
So let me slow you down just a little bit, because I want to know a little bit more about the circumstances of your parents and this extended family. What's the heritage? You know,
they're Sicilian.
Sicilian. Okay.
They're Sicilian.
So it goes way back to the old country, and that particular part of that particular old country.
Oh yeah, they basically. It's a big family with a lot of cousins, and they all eventually moved to the same area of Detroit because they were cousins and family, and they knew that if they could support each other's businesses, help each other in business, help, you know, whether loaning them money or support the business or go in partnerships or whatever. So they all kind of migrated to the same place. So like my grandfather and this boss of this mobster, Vito Toko, they grew up together in the old country in the same neighborhood, you know, as cousins. And so their parents moved to Detroit. My great grandfather originally moved to St. Louis, got in some kind of trouble, went back to Sicily, left my grandfather with his brother Joe Tocco, who migrated to Detroit because he had family and cousins in Detroit there, all this family. And then my great grandfather ended up coming back to the United States with a new wife, and then took his kids back, my great aunt and my grandfather, and started, they all were in this community, and there was more than just their family. There was a large Sicilian community from the old country, probably, I don't know, probably 300 or 400 people, you know what I'm saying? Quite a large community, right? And they all were really, really hard workers. So when they came here, they helped each other start businesses, and they basically took over the Eastern Market, which is basically Detroit's little Italy. And they started construction companies, and a lot of this is during like Prohibition time, so there was a lot of that money floating around too. My great grandfather came here, didn't speak a lick of English on my grandmother's side, and like he started with a fruit truck, but then like within 10 years he's like a multimillionaire just during Prohibition, and everybody he hung around were like gangsters and stuff. So I have vague memories. I met him, so but I was a little kid, but he didn't speak any English, so I didn't really communicate with him. But anyway, he became a builder and in Lido's Construction, and still to this day, Lido's Construction is a well-known builder in Detroit, builds houses and big buildings and all that. But that was him. So all these Sicilians came and worked together, and they really stuck together as a tight community and lived in the same neighborhood and supported each other. And I didn't know any of that. And when I was a kid, all I was around was Sicilians. You know what I'm saying? Once I moved in with my grandparents, all their friends and family were in the neighborhood, and they all spoke Sicilian more than they spoke English. And, you go to birthday parties and weddings and funerals and events and all these things, and it's the same, old Sicilians from the old country. And that culture was instilled in me, and it was the only culture I ever knew, really, was the Sicilian culture, because like I said, I was 5 years old. That became, all I knew. And they took great pride in their culture, Sicilian heritage, where like my father's side, like I didn't know anything about my father's heritage or his parents and grandparents. I didn't know nothing. Like I like had one aunt who I met a few times in my life. That's it. Where on my mother's side, I was surrounded by this very warm and like steeped in their culture, family, Sicilians.
So that's really interesting. So your mother's side was the one that had kind of the close knit warmth, but they were actually the criminal side. Your dad's side was not necessarily involved in the illegal activities, but he was the one who was a drunk and abusive.
Yeah.
That's really just kind of an interesting dynamic. Have you sort of reflected on that at all as you've tried to process your personal history? And
I first of all, I don't like to say that my immediate family was involved in crime, right? It's possible that my grandfather was like a layoff bookie, like somebody who helps bookies when their books are unbalanced, they help them find betters. And anyways, it's a long story. I was told by my uncles that, and then I had uncles like that were involved, and cousins and stuff. But like my immediate family, like my grandfather, I don't think he was I do firmly believe that he was like, if the boss or one of his cousins were like, hey, listen, do me a favor, run this box of fruit or produce over to Tony's house, and it would have been $500,000 in cash, he would do it. So
they might have been benefiting from this, but not directly involved. It's just
yeah. My grandfather had a contract just to provide all of Detroit public schools with produce and food for the schools for like 40 years. So you can't get that kind of contract in Detroit at that time without mafia connections. You just couldn't get it. And so the boss was connected to all the government officials and all the local, everybody's comptrollers and whatever, mayors, ever. And so I'm sure he said, listen, give my cousin this contract. And maybe a kickback comes your way. And then I'm sure my grandfather probably gave a kickback to the boss for getting him the contract every year. And it's a modern day equivalent of, $4, $5, $10 million contract, where it basically provided for my entire family for 40 years. And so I mean, was he involved directly in crime? I don't know. I don't think so, but maybe. I don't know. But all around him was criminals. All around him were his cousins and his uncles, and they're all criminals, going back to Prohibition and gangsters. But he was friendly with them, and they were still his family, and he treated them as such. He was very respectful to them. And again, just because they're organized criminals, he didn't care. That was his cousins and his family, and he treated them. And the thing is, it's not like the criminals were in your face. I'm a gangster with a gun running around blasting people. They projected themselves and carried themselves as just legitimate businessmen. But of course, everybody in the know knew that they were involved in, certain rackets and crimes. But nobody, it's not like you would talk about it. My grandfather would be like, so you got the big city contract with the mayor. Well, how much did you give a kickback for? Or it's none of his business. You know what I'm saying? He'd just be like, oh, congratulations. You got the big $40 million contract. Good for you. That's it. Yeah. And that was how.
So for those of us who may have watched The Sopranos, it sounds like obviously there were Hollywood moments and all that, and very dramatic and well produced. But it sounds like, they were trying to like create kind of an authentic approach to how it really worked.
The Sopranos, yeah, they did okay. A lot of it was Hollywood and not great, but a lot of it was good. And a lot of it was good writing, and it was very realistic. I mean, The Godfather, for example, I didn't really know what my family was or anything about it until I saw The Godfather, and then everything made sense. So I was about 12 years. I was about 12 years old, and The Godfather was very realistic to the world I grew up in, and not like my grandfather was a don or nothing like that. But you're in that world. So imagine imagine your great uncle is the don, and imagine he comes around and hangs out with your grandfather and plays bocce ball and smokes cigars and barbecues with him, and comes and calls the house or comes around, and you just all these different mobsters like in The Godfather. Those type of guys are in your house all the time, and they're coming over in their Cadillacs and their pinky rings, and they're smoking cigars, and they're speaking in Sicilian, and then they gotta speak in private. They go in the back room and they whisper, and they lock the door, and they're eating meatballs and pasta. It all made sense. I was 12 years old, and I went to my Uncle Joe Toco's house, and he looked like a prototypical mobster. Big, heavy-set guy, very swarthy and like dark-skinned, hair slicked back, pinky ring, always smoking a cigar. Drove a big Lincoln, which everybody made fun of because everybody else drove Cadillacs, but he's the only guy who drove a Lincoln. And anyways, I was at the house watching The Godfather with my cousin Patrice and cousin Jerry and my sister and my mother, and I'm watching it, and then everything began to make sense, because why when I go to the corner store by our house, which is just down the block, down the alley, the old Greek guy wouldn't take my money. If I go to buy some candy or ice cream, he'd be like, oh, no, Alonzo, no, tell Papa I said hi here. And he'd send a package of meat or cold cuts or something for my grandfather, my grandmother. And he wouldn't take my money, but he would take the other kids' money, my friends. But some of the other mob kids, he wouldn't take their money either, because they were all in the neighborhood, all the mob grandsons and nephews or whatever. So I started to put that together. Also, how much respect everybody gave my grandfather around in the market or wherever he went, because I go with ride-alongs with him all the time. He'd take me to get pizza or ice cream or whatever, and we go to different places, and everybody would shake his hand with two hands and kiss him on the cheek, and because he was a Toco, regardless of if he was a mobster involved or not, he was a Toco, and he was related to these people, and he was very close with these people, and everybody knew that because they'd see him together and see him at functions and weddings and whatever, and they were always talking. So you'd see that, and then after a while, I started asking my uncle about the mafia, what's the deal? And he started telling me, my two uncles, Uncle Sal and Uncle Pete, and they were like, Uncle Joe is this guy, Uncle Tony's that guy, and he's like, you remember, Tony Jack, Uncle Tony? I'm like, yeah, from when I was a kid. And then I didn't see him for years, and then he popped up again when I was 14 years old. And I remember saying I remember him when I was young, as a kid. He taught me to play poker when I was 5, 6, whatever, 7. I don't remember how old I was, but I was very young. And my uncle said, "Oh, he was in prison." Well, he said he was at college. That's what he said. He was at college. I'm like, what do you mean?
He was getting an education.
Yeah, he was in prison for 7 years. So anyways, they started filling me in on the who's who. and I didn't really care. I didn't care because I was like a little kid, you know, young. Even when I was like teenager, I'm like, I didn't care. But it started to like, I did form a certain like belief or opinion that, oh, okay, there's criminals in our family and they're treated with high respect and high regard. So it's okay to break the law or bend rules or whatever. In my mind, I started to think of this. And then one day I asked like my uncle to buy me a mini bike. Because I saw it on the way to, we moved out of my grandparents' house, me, my mother, and my sister, and we lived about 10 miles away. But every weekend we would go back to my grandparents' house and spend the whole weekend there in the old neighborhood. And, you know, we were poor, so we went there to eat and do laundry, and, you know, and plus all my cousins and friends and everybody that I grew up with were there in that neighborhood. On the way there, I saw this mini bike on the side of the road, and I'm like, I want that mini bike. So I asked my Uncle Pete, who I knew he had money. He was a hustler, young hustler. He had a nice car, and he wore nice tracksuits and gold chains, and he always had a big knot of money in his pocket. And him and his boys would play dice, and he'd be throwing around $200-300 playing dice. Because he'd say, Alonzo, come with me down to the market. And I'd be like, yeah, cool. I like hanging out with him, because he'd always buy me food and ice cream, and just like, he loved me. You know what I'm saying? He was only 12 years older than me, so he was like a big brother. And so he would drag me along through these, you know, ride-alongs when you go meet friends or girls or whatever. And so I knew he had money, so I said to him, Uncle Pete, buy me that mini bike. It's $100. He's like, I'm not buying you no mini bike, man. I'm not giving you $100, but I'll tell you how to get it. And he said, you know those little Jerry Lewis cans, you know, the cans, the charity cans, that you jiggle the can. Would you like to donate to Jerry Lewis muscular dystrophy? Do you remember those, Wade?
Yep.
So he says, go to the liquor store, 7-Eleven, get one of those cans and jingle, 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 and collect your money. Keep the money, turn in like $10, and then you can buy your mini bike. So basically that's what I did. I tried it at the store there, and I only make like $10 in like an hour. It's going to take me forever. So I drove my pedal bike about 8 miles, which is a long ways for a 12-year-old kid. You know, I'm like 12 years old. 8 miles is a long ways, man. Like I wasn't even sure I knew how to get to this Kmart, but I went to this Kmart, which I knew was busy with traffic. And I stood out there for 4 hours, and I collected 4 cans of money, like packed it, dumped it in a bag, packed it, dumped it in and then I tied the bags to like a double bag that tied it to my handlebars and drove home, dumped it out, counted that out, $140. So I kept 130, turned in 10, and went and called my dad, said, Dad, take me to buy this mini bike. And he said, so where'd you get the money? I said, my Uncle Pete gave it to me, which is a partial lie, yes. But I mean, So anyways, but in my mind, I was just like, this is my uncle who I look up to, who I admire and want to be like, telling me this is okay. So it was okay. So I did it. So, you know, and there were other things that, you know, like that.
So I think that, and thank you, that was awesome to sort of paint that full picture of those early childhood experiences and get those different vignettes. We're going to go to a quick commercial break, which is actually a video that you've provided, which will now kind of form that transition. And then we'll get into that next phase. We've seen really how those circumstances kind of maybe normalized it and made it seem natural and, you know, like kind of the right thing and an okay thing to do. Yeah. And I think this video does a great job of transitioning. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back to learn more about the story of Gunnar Lindbloom.
I'm inside of a garage bleeding out. I see blood dumping out of my stomach, pouring out. I ran right out of my shoes. I don't even remember that. This is one of the worst ghettos in Detroit, or even the world. And all I could think about, man, I don't want my girl to get the phone call that my body was found dead, bleeding out in the hood. So I said, I'm going to live today. My name is Gunnar Allen Lindbloom. At age 14, I was indoctrinated in a life of crime, organized crime, through my uncle and some members of my family.
For the record, I'm done trying to make y'all comfortable.
Nobody knew that. I didn't share with anyone because I was told never share anything outside of the family.
For the record, ain't trying to link, no time to waste.
Then we started selling drugs, and I got involved in my own drugs and bad habits and gambling. Eventually, I started doing armed robberies. I started doing bank robberies. At the very end, before I went to prison, I didn't care anymore. I wasn't getting signed off on, meaning I was a maverick. Nobody was giving me permission to do nothing. I was keeping all the money. So the family was like, you know what? We can't help it. 17 capital charges, all of them carried life. And in the end, I couldn't beat any of them. So I took a plea agreement, and that put me away for 13 to 50 years. And so at that point, the game was over. So I get to prison. It was horrible, as everybody thinks. The worst part is the crazy people. You're in there with the worst of the worst. Level 2s and 4s, where I was my entire 13-year bit, was where you have all the murderers and the rapists and the gangs. The interesting part is I knew I had this gift. I had these stories in my mind. I love reading, which is crazy. So I got to prison. I told myself, I'm not going to be another number. I'm going to walk out of here. I'm going to write these stories. I'm going to write these novels. There was a girl I went to school with. Never knew her, but she said, I work for a publisher. I see that you're a writer. Maybe I could help. She said, I was shocked when I read this book, could not believe how well it was written. She started writing me through letters, and we hadn't talked on a phone at all for a year. I mean, literally 1,000 pages of letters we wrote. But eventually she started to say, I feel more than friends here. Called it the painted line. We can't cross that line. I have 7 years left in prison. You can't fall in love with me. But she did. And I fell in love with her. And one day we just decided, let's get on the phone and talk. And she waited 6 years for me. The day that I got out, she was waiting there for me, and she had a big, beautiful meal for me. And the next day, I married her. We were married. We went to the municipal building. My two friends were the witnesses, and the funny part was the clerk reading the vows, and my wife were pretty much, a little teary-eyed. Me and my boys were like bawling. And then I published this book. To Be a King. And right away, within 72 hours, it cracked the top 100 in the world, peaking at 28. And everybody's saying the same thing. Why is this not a movie yet?
So I think that's just such an amazing transition. It tells so much, and now we get to dive deep. But I got to ask one question right now, because I'm sure everybody else is thinking the same thing. Why isn't it a movie yet?
My story or my books?
Well, either one.
Well, there's a lot of things, it wasn't God's timing yet, but so my life has been made into a documentary that's in post-production now, and I hope to be released this summer. Armando Sante narrates it in part. It's Seth Ferrante is the director. He directed White Boy Rick on Netflix. And then there's a TV script too that's associated with it. But it's never been my focus to my own life. It just isn't. I've never thought of it as that all that remarkable until I started writing the script and recording the documentary and videos like this. I'm like, it's very remarkable, my love story. But what makes my story unique is my books, and there's no way you can understand that until you read them. But once you read them, then you'll like this. I promise you, if you read my books, anybody who reads my books are going to go. They're going to forget about my story, and they're just going to go, this guy is incredibly talented. Like, God put his hand on this guy and gave him a gift. There's no way around it. I got an 8th grade education. So what makes my story remarkable is my books. Now, why are my books not been made a movie? They've been optioned for films, but getting them produced is not easy. It's so hard to break into Hollywood these days.
Yeah.
It's such a cloistered, tight knit. Like unless you know somebody, you can't get a manuscript. Plus, Hollywood doesn't like to read. They like short, like treatments, which is like a little 5 or 10 page description of a story, or maybe a script, which is 90 to 120 pages. They don't want to read 2 500-page novels, because in order to understand the magnitude of my books and what I do as a writer, you have to read both volumes of the books. It's all one big story. It's 1,100 pages. If you read them both, you'll be floored, and you'll be like, oh my goodness, this needs to be made a movie. Sandra Petty, who is a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist for Newsweek, read both my books and called me because I had interviewed her, so I had her number. She exchanged numbers. And she calls me and goes, why isn't this in the movie? Like, how has Martin Scorsese not made this a movie? And I'm like, well, it's not that easy. But if you know any agents or anyone, so she hooked me up with like a big agent, right? And the agent said, I can't sell a 500-page book, man. He's like, the publishers today want them to be 250, 300 pages. I'm like, well, if I cut it to that low, short, I would hack the story apart and it'd ruin it. And
well,
so,
I mean, I guess the one thing I can say is, when I was a teenager, I read the book Dune by Frank Herbert like 3 times. And, speaking of Scorsese, wasn't it, or was it, I'm trying to remember, Coppola, his daughter made a version of Dune that kind of sucked, sorry. And there were like 3 failed versions of that book, because they kept trying to actually make a decent movie. The one that's out now in 2 parts actually finally really gets at it. But this is like 30, 40 years. The book, your book, the way you're describing your book, it reminds me of the book Dune. It is so meaty, so weighty, so involved, such elaborate storytelling that it was almost impossible to make a good movie out of it. You know what I mean?
Well,
a book and a movie are totally different experiences.
I got a fan reader a couple weeks ago who messaged me. He said, and private message said, good morning, although it's not really good morning because I just finished reading volume 2 of your book, and the way it ended, I'm not happy. You know what I'm saying? Where's volume 3? And I said, it's in my head, and when I get a movie deal for volume 1, I'll write it. And he wrote me back and said, please don't make a movie out of it. You'll ruin it. It's got to be a series. It's got to be made into a series.
It's like I'm into season 4 of Lost, right? Don't say anything. Everybody's watched, but 7 seasons of 20 shows. What is that? 100 hours of film. Yeah. Maybe that's what's needed, right? But let's move off that topic, because I want to ask a different question now, and that is, so your books are part of your story. That's a gift that God gave you, and that's critically important. But I want to go back to the moment when you began to get hope, and I want to understand the source of divine inspiration for you. Where did the presence of God, or the Word of God, or what God had in store for you, how did that begin to get through to you and begin to change you?
Listen, it's kind of a long story, but I got to tell it to you, because I was 19 years old. I was in the county jail for selling steroids. I got busted selling steroids. And so one day I was like hustling at the card table. I think I was running a dice game, and I got irritated by someone. I was debating whether I was going to, beat him up. You know what I'm saying? I was trying to control myself. So I said, I'm going to back away and take a breather. And I sat down in this chair, and I looked on the floor, and there's a little daily devotional called The Daily Bread. I never heard of it. I didn't know what it was, but something compelled me, which was God, to pick it up and read it. So I flicked it up and read it. Was it to that it's every day. There's the devotional, a Bible verse of the day, and whatever. So I read it, and I'm telling you, it spoke to me. Like literally, it was like God speaking to me. And I'm like, well, this can't be a coincidence, or maybe it is, whatever. But I'm going to keep this thing. So I put it in my cell, and before I went to bed every night, I'd read it. And I'm telling you, for like 2-3 weeks, and I'm going, this can't not be God. This is for, I was raised Catholic, of course, I'm Italian. but I never made confirmation. I didn't know Jesus. I didn't pay attention in catechism. I just, whatever. But I did believe that there was a God, but I didn't realize like how real he was until I read this book every day. And it was like speaking direct. It was just exactly like somebody had wrote it to address the issues and problems and things I was thinking that day. So after like 3 weeks of it, I was like, dude, this is God. There's no way this is a coincidence anymore. This is literally God trying to communicate with me. I don't know why. Why would he want to communicate? But he is. Wow. Then it gets even crazier. Then a dove lands in my window. I'm 11 stories up. And it's in the county jail. I'm the very top floor, 11th floor. There's a little like 4-inch slit of glass in the wall, and you can look out at the world, right? A dove lands, and it's looking in at me, and it stays there for like 2 weeks, man. It just leaves and it comes back and leaves, and it's looking at me. And I'm telling my boys in jail, in the jail unit with me, I'm like, look at this dove in the window. It's not looking out at the world like a normal bird would be looking out. It's looking in at me. And I'm going, and I remember somebody saying, the dove is a representation of the Holy Spirit and da-da-da. What are you talking about, bro? It's a dove. And that was the end of it. But I believed in God, and this is where it gets really crazy. So my girlfriend paid a lawyer to try to get me a time cut, which would get me out 34 days early. It was worth paying a lawyer $500. Let's give it a shot. They don't happen very often, but maybe you get lucky. Every night I read one of those daily breads before I went to bed, and I never skip forward to the next day. And they make them for 3 months at a time. So it's like, it's pretty thick. I was about 3/4 of the way done with it, and I never looked at the next day. But I thought to myself, I'm going to court tomorrow, and if I get out, I won't be here the next night to read what tomorrow says. And I kind of want to know, because again, these things have been speaking in my heart for like 2 months.
You want the guidance for your first day out.
Exactly. I want to know, what's God think? Is he going to let me out? Whatever. Dude, this will blow your mind, bro. I flipped the page, and it's the next page is empty. And the next page, and the next page, and the next page. The whole rest of the book was empty, bro. All of them. For like 12 pages were empty. And so I was like, well, I know I'm going home tomorrow then. I threw it down. I go to the court. My sister, my grandma and grandpa Toko, they were in the courtroom. And I had this like monologue rehearsed that I'm going to say to the judge when he asked me if I want. And he says, is there anything you'd like to say to the court, Mr. Lindbloom? I said, yes, Your Honor. He said, time cut granted, get out of here. Boom, done. I was out of it, right? So from that day on, I knew God was real, right? And I
got to tell you what's coming to me right now, and that is that to me, and I don't know how you felt about it, but he got you through, and then he said, that next page, it's a blank slate, buddy. It's now on you. I got you through this. You're going out. What are you going to do with it?
Well, I'm a knucklehead. So here's how I communed with God. I knew he's real at this point, so you couldn't tell me otherwise. I was 100% certain. I didn't know Jesus, but I knew God was real, and he talked to me through that book and everything that happened. Every time I got on my motorcycle, I had a Ninja crotch rocket, calf weight bike. And I drove like a madman, and I wasn't even that good of a driver, and some guys who can do wheelies and drive great and are really good. I wasn't. I try wheelies, and I drove like a lunatic. Every time I got on that bike, before I'd hit the start button, I'd say, God, protect me on this thing. And he did, man. I drove like a maniac. I should have been killed 1,000 times on that thing. And I never had a single close call. So moving forward over the next 10 years, I battled addiction. I just did gangster stuff. I think I had one job where I managed a health club for about 1.5 years, 2 years. But even that was a scam. I was skimming, robbing the place blind. The owner was a drug addict and a gambling degenerate. Well, his dad owned the place, and he was the general manager of this hotel, health club, and nightclub all in one building. But he owed my uncle a bunch of money, so I was, skimming money to take, and I was making a ton of money. But I was always doing illegal stuff, selling drugs, and then I got fired from that job because they found out I was, embezzling. And like the father found out. And so I was just like, I went through life as a criminal. Basically, I did organized crime sometimes. And sometimes mobsters would ask me to do them favors or intimidate or, collection, whatever it was. Most of the time I was doing my own things, just selling drugs and scams and rackets and extorting or whatever I was doing. Sometimes I was addicted to drugs for 6, 8, 9, 10 months. And I get cleaned up. I go to jail for 2 weeks and clean up. And then I'd be clean for 4 years, Then I'd You know, like I broke my knuckle in a fight and they gave me pain pills and that set me off. You know, I broke my ankle and another just fluke thing. I slipped off a curb and broke my ankle. Pain pills sparked it. You know what I'm saying? Then my best friend died. That really kind of sent me off the deep end. His name was Jason Battaglia. He was an Italian kid, you know, good looking kid, and my boy, my best friend in my whole life. And when he died, I was just like, the first thing I wanted to do was get high, and I did, and that kind of sent me off the deep end, and I never really recovered from that. But ultimately, in the end, I at the end, and I won't get into it's a whole long story about how I really met my demise, but basically, my house got raided and there was a bunch of drugs in it and guns and things like that. And the cops didn't charge me right away with it, but they made it kind of a public spectacle when they raided my house, and everybody knew I got raided, but there was no charges and no bond, no nothing. So it made me look like I was a cooperator. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
They made me look like I was a rat. They did that on purpose, you know, to kind of see, you know, what would scurry out from under the rug, I guess. I don't know. And they followed me around for months. And before they raided my house, they actually followed me around in a helicopter for a couple of days. No joke. Just like in the movie Goodfellas, same thing. Like they followed me for 20 miles, bro. And when I hid in a subdivision under some trees, they were circling over and the trees were blowing around me and they were on me. And I got to the point where I'm like, they're just following me now. So what am I going to do? I was still picking up drugs, selling drugs, doing crime. I'm like, they don't know what I'm doing. They're just following my car. And whatever. And then, of course, they raided my house. And then, you know, I'm screwed now. They didn't find a bunch of money I had stashed in the house, which I needed for bond and lawyers or whatever, survive. Because once this happened, none of my like criminal associates, drug dealers and all would deal with me because they thought I was a cooperator. You know what I'm saying? Because they could go online and be like, what were your charges? Well, there are no charges. How much was your bond? Well, there was no bond. They raided your house, bro, and they carried out all guns and drugs, and you're not in jail. Like, what happened? Like, I don't know. They told me they were waiting on the laboratory results for the drugs. They tried to get me to cooperate. I said, no, you don't have a case. I wasn't in the house when you raided it. The house wasn't in my name. You have no hand-to-hand buys. There's no fingerprints on drugs. There's nothing. It's my girlfriend's house, and she and her brother live there, not me. And they were like, well, maybe we get you, maybe we don't. I'm like, you're never going to get me. And then they charged me 9 months later. I paid a ton of money for a lawyer, fought it, got probation. They threw out all the major drugs and charged me with like possession of analogs, steroids, and like Vicodins. And so I got like 6 months probation, but I couldn't make any money because all my hustler homeboys wouldn't deal with me. You know what I'm saying? They were just like, I was persona non grata. I would go down to the market and where my cousins were like hanging out, they have businesses, and I'd walk in and the whole room would get quiet. You know, I'd be like, what's up, Al? How's that case? And I'm like, there is no case. They didn't charge me with nothing. And they're like, don't look good, man. I want to beat them up. I'm like, I'll smash your head in, man. Are you kidding me? You think I'm a rat? So nobody would deal with me. And so in the end, that's when my life kind of spun out of control. I started using drugs. I was using probably $2,000 plus a week in drugs, opiates. And then I just went on a crime spree at the end because I didn't care. I didn't care if I live or die. But I got to tell you, there's one really, really important piece of this puzzle. I got to go back to when I was about 23 or 4, right? I was buying cocaine and selling it in the suburb, buying it in the hood, selling it in the suburb to a cousin of mine, Italian kid in the suburb who was rocking it up and making crack. I was making about $400 a day from this. Which was, good money for me. $400 a day is a good chunk of money. I wasn't using drugs or nothing at the time. So I was, $400. I was only like 23 and I sold weed and steroids and all these other things that I was doing. So I was making a ton of money. Well, I ended up getting into it with some black dude. And like I knocked him out and beat him up real bad. Right. And so later that day, he knew the guy that I was getting my drugs from. Was a guy named Lorenzo, and there was an abandoned houses around. This is in the ghetto, a really bad ghetto of Detroit, just really, really bad. I shouldn't have been in that area. Like my, white dude should never be down there. And I was down there like whatever. A lot of time I had a gun, but I didn't have one on this day. And so I go down there and I'm waiting for my boy Lorenzo to finish eating so he can bring me out the package. And dude slips out of the house behind me, smashes me in the head with a baseball bat from behind. And I kind of turn around. I mean, bang! You're like, what the hell? And I turn around and he breaks the wood Louisville over my head. And I still got a big scar on my head right there. It breaks the bat and it spins me against the car. I grab him, start choking him out. I try to kill him. One of them stabs me, another one hits me with the bottle in the face. They start kicking and punch me. I won't let go. I'm trying to kill this guy. I got him by the throat, right? And then one of them comes up with a 2x4 and is like about to whack me in the back of the head with his 2x4. So I lunge forward off this dude. It comes across the back of my leg. Now I don't know I'm stabbed at the time. So I end up running out of my shoes, running through backyards, leave my car there with the keys in it, running through a bunch of backyards, jumping fences. I go a couple blocks over. I'm out of breath. The sun's just going down, so it's just about dark. I'm in no shoes. I have no shirt on. I'm covered in blood. I'm just drenched in blood. The gash is to the bone, and it's just pouring. And I've been stabbed too, and so I'm out of breath. And I like, man, I don't want to die. So I jump another block fence. I start walking on the street. I'm super thirsty. And I see on the side of this house, this is where it gets crazy. There's a faucet on the side of this house that has a vacant lot next to it. So I can see the faucet. And I'm walking down the street in the worst ghetto in Detroit, probably one of the worst ghettos in America for sure. Barefoot, bloody white kid. And I'm a 23-year-old white kid. I go over to the faucet to try to get some water. I hear a woman yell from across the street, "Hey, get away from my house. What are you doing by my house?" I stand up. I can barely see because there's so much blood in my eye. I turn around. I say, "Oh, I'm sorry, ma'am. I was just trying to get some water. I'm thirsty." And she comes walking up and she says to me, "What happened to you, baby? You get in a car accident?" I said, "No, I got jumped." And she says, "Come here. I'm going to get you some water." So she walks me up on her porch and sets me down in this chair. I'm telling you, this is where Jesus said, be careful of who you talk to and how you treat people, because you may be interacting with an angel. I sit down in this chair. I notice right away the house is nicer than all the other houses. Kind of odd. She comes out with a crystal clear glass of water, very clean glass of ice water, and gives me a starched white, like hotel room towel. It says, "Put that on your head." Well, your towel's ruined now. Put it on your head because it stopped the leak. Gives me a glass of water. I slam it down. I say, "Ma'am, can I have another glass of water?" She says, "Yes." She brings it out. All I remember is saying, "Don't drink it all because you're going to be thirsty in a minute." So I drink half of it. I set it down. Next thing you know, EMS is there. I probably was in and out of consciousness for like 20, 30 minutes, however long it takes for the EMS to get there in Detroit to give it an hour. I go to the hospital. They clean me up. They stitch me up. The doctor says, "Dude, I don't know how you didn't get a punctured lung. When they stabbed you, you're on top of the guy. So they came from the side and like tried to stab up into you, but it just like slipped under my sternum and like just nicked my lung. It didn't cause any damage." He's like, "It's like a miracle." And then he says, "I got to do plastic surgery on the head to sew the muscle back together." He's like, "I'm not certified to do that. So if you sign a waiver, I'll do it. But if I don't, you're going to have a droopy eye and you're going to have a big dent in your head." And he's like, "You're a good looking kid. And let me fix you up." I said, "Yeah." I signed a waiver. They fixed me up. They cleaned me all up. I just wanted to get to a bath. My leg was hurting the worst. Of course, I had a headache, but my leg, they tore my hamstring off my leg, completely tore it. Like it was black and blue from my ankle to my butt for like a month. When they hit me with the 2x4, when they went to smash me in the head, I lunged forward and it came across the back of my leg. Somehow I still ran and jumped fences for 3 blocks. But anyways, here's what's interesting. So I'm thinking about this woman for a couple of days, this black woman who called the ambulance and gave me the water. And I said, "I'm going to scrape together some money." So I scraped together, I think it was a couple $1,000. It's all I had. And I'm going to go give her this money. I figured she lives in the hood. You know what I mean? A couple $1,000 is a lot of money to her. Very least I can just do something kind and nice for her. I go to look for this woman's house and I can't find it, Wade. I drive up and down every block 10 times. I spend hours driving down every possible block it could be. The house isn't there. It was a white house, green trim, green awning over the porch, green chair on the porch with a vacant lot. I can see it plain as day to mind. Like you can't miss it. It was the nicest house on the block. A little house, little sided, white-sided house with green trim, but in nice shape. House is gone. So all I can think to myself is, that was an angel. And I don't know, God sent this woman to save me. And she did. So now I know God is, on my side. And there's a whole lot more to it. But really, before I got arrested after I robbed the bank and went on a crime spree and I robbed the bank, I had been like I always prayed every day before I get in my car, turn the music down, and I back out, and I'd say a long prayer. And the prayer would last about 20 minutes. I'd pray for the world. I would pray for my enemies. I would pray for everybody, the whole world, that would find peace, that Jesus would give us. And then I'd be like, please, I pray in Jesus' name that I don't go to jail today. And every single day that I prayed that, I never went to jail. But in a matter of like 2 years, over the period of 2 years, I forgot to pray 5 times, and all 5 days I went to jail. All 5 times I got arrested. Nothing major, it was nothing major. It was like traffic warrants or minor stuff. But I still ended up going to jail. And I was just, as soon as I get pulled over, I go, oh, I didn't pray today, and I forgot to pray. And anyway, so then I get arrested for all these crimes, and I get thrown in jail. And while I'm in the county jail, I get into a fight, end up in the hole, solitary confinement. Then I get into it for 30 days. Then I get into it with the officers who are like total D-bags. They're just basically treating me like I'm a subhuman because I know I'm facing 1 million years. I'm on a $5 million bond. I have 17 capital crime charges. They're trying to give me 30 years. They treat me like I'm a dog. You know what I'm saying? And I'd mouth off to them or whatever. And so they end up beating me up. So moral of the story is I'm in the hole, solitary confinement for a month. I'm coming back from court one day, and I tore my shoulder when I was in the county jail. Tore my rotator cuff bad. Of course, they didn't do nothing. They just threw me back in the zone. I mean, I literally ripped it. You heard it go pop and rip like a piece of cardboard going, and it ripped. And it's like they did nothing. And so on my way back to court, they're yanking on me, and they're putting me back in the solitary confinement. I've been in there for about 3 months now in the hole, and they're yanking on my shoulder. And I look at this guy, and I said, bro, what are you doing, bro? I know where we're going. Calm down. You're going to rip my shoulder out of socket. I got a bad shoulder. Calm down. He said, shut up, inmate. You're not allowed to talk. You can't talk. Shut up. And I said something about the size of his manhood, and like, oh, that's your problem. I get it. And they all laughed. But then when I got me off the camera, because there's cameras in the hallway, but they got me in the elevator, they all jumped on me and they beat me up. They all just I'm cuffed from behind, and there's 6 of them, and they all just stomped me out bad. So I had to get stitches. I had a couple different places where I had to get stitches, but they brought me back to my cell. And before I got to my cell, they took all my pictures and my letters from my grandparents and my girlfriend and friends, and they put them on my bunk with the pictures that were giving me hope kind of for a future, like my fishing and hunting pictures, my dog, my girlfriend. And they dumped a bucket of mop bucket of water across my bunk. Then they put me in the cell, and they turn around and back up so you can uncuff. So you back up to your bars, and they uncuff you. And I turn around and I say, now come in and get me. And I'm screaming, dropping a lot of bad language, saying, come in and get me now, a lot of mother effers. And they walk away. So I sit on my bunk, and I realize it's all wet, and there's all my pictures, and I start drying them off, and they're dripping of water, and I'm out of breath. Blood is dripping off my head, dripping off my nose, it's dripping off my ear. And I decide, man, I don't want to do this. I'm just going to kill myself. You know what I'm saying? So I come to the point where, like, I'm not doing this for 30 years, man. I'm not afraid to die. I just check out. They give you a shower, razor to shave in the shower with once a week. You can break it open, slit your wrist in the shower. You get an hour out. So you just sit down in there and maybe pray and just be like, it's over. I'll check out, whatever. I'm not afraid to die. I've been shot and stabbed. I've been shot a couple times. And like, whatever. And it was at that moment that God spoke to me. When, some people hear the voice. Some people have a dream. I can't explain it. It was more of like a presence. And he just said, man, I got your back. You can do this. I'll protect you. I gave you a gift, and I want you to use this time to use this gift, to utilize this gift I've given you. And I'm like, I'm just got beat up. I'm out of breath. I'm like, am I losing it here? Like, I'm feeling God saying this to me, And I look at a letter on my bunk, and in it, the letter was from my grandmother, Toko, and it said, you write the most beautiful letters. You could be a writer. You should be a writer. And I turned and looked at my little desk that's bolted to the wall, and it's covered in novels that I'd read. And I literally, every single one of them I read, I said, as I was reading them, I said, these aren't that good. I could do better. Like, these are by John Grisham and Sidney Sheldon and Robert Ludlum and some of my favorite authors. But as I'm reading them, I'm going, they're not as good as it could be. I believe I could do better. And then that's what I was thinking as I read them. And now God is saying, I gave you this. And he said, there's a light. Without saying it, he told me there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and I'm going to get you there. Use this gift, and it'll get you there. It'll create a life for you. It'll create a future for yourself. And I remember looking down the hallway, which was dark, and at the end of the hallway was a door with a little window in it, and there was a bright light on the other side of the window. So it was like you're looking down the hall looking down a tunnel with a light at the end of the tunnel. And it all made sense. And I felt this peace come over me. Like, I felt God's peace come over me. And I knew I was going to be all right. I knew this is what I was going to do. This is what he wanted me to do. And he said he would protect me. And so who can harm me if God is for me? I knew that. So I just said, okay, this is what he wants me to do. I can get through this. He gave me this load to bear, this burden to bear. He's going to get me through it. So I spent the next 14 months in that cell writing, because after that event, they said that I attacked them to justify them beating me up, because I had to get stitches and stuff and go to the infirmary. To justify them beating me up, they said I attacked them. And because of that, they classified me as a permanent, like, in the hole. So even if I went there to this day, 23 years later, if I went to that jail, they put me straight in the hole and I never get out. That's it. You're just permanently in the hole. They said I'm extremely violent. I was classified as an extreme violence, and which carried over into prison with me, because I was classified as extreme violence. I was put in these high-level maximum security prisons my whole 13 years, except 7 months I was in a lower level. But anyways, so I wrote 3 books while I was in solitary confinement in my mind. And one of them was To Be a King, the book's about the Mafia family that everybody loves and says is the next Godfather. I didn't write those books until they were essentially my 5th and 6th books, or my 6th and 7th book. Because I had the 5 books that I wrote before them, I just liked the stories better. I was like, I'm not a mafia writer. People know me as a mafia writer because the 2 books I published are about a mafia family, and they compared to The Godfather, and everybody says you wrote the next Godfather. But really, dude, I'm not a mafia writer. I'm just a writer who wrote a mafia story. The other 5 stories I wrote, which I liked better, that predated those books, were just, books that I like. They're about other things, sports, a comedic drama, a romantic drama. There's 2 sports team books, a Jason Bourne type of, like, Robert Ludlum's book, called Eagle's Talon. But anyways, when I wrote that 6th novel, I wrote it as 1 book, but I had to divide it into 2 volumes because it was 1,100 pages. This is where it gets really interesting with my wife, and your audience would appreciate, I think. So there's one other thing I got to tell you. I forgot to tell you. When I first got to prison, when I got sentenced to prison, I get a letter from a guy named Joe Rubino. And he was a guy that I had pretty much robbed like 8 years earlier. He fronted me 8 or 10 pounds of weed, I can't remember, and I just never paid him. And he was a big muscle bound guy, but steroided out muscle bound guy, but he wasn't a tough guy. I knew that. And so he was no threat. And really nobody was a threat to me, because I robbed drug dealers and stuff like that all the time. It's one of the things that I did because I wasn't scared. It's like, you're not going to kill me, I'll kill you. Or, you're not going to beat me up, because you can't. If you come at me like with thinking you're going to beat me up, I'll beat your brains out, and that'll be that, and pull a gun. And so nobody bothered me. I'd robbed a lot of drug dealers, and they were just like, what are you going to do? He was one of them. So I get a letter from this dude, and I get to prison right when I get out of quarantine. And in the letter, it's a bizarre letter. He says, listen, I am a born again Christian. I married a girl from the church choir. I don't sell drugs. I'm not a drug dealer anymore. I got a good job. I'm a financial headhunter in Chicago. I moved to Chicago, started a new life. I'm a Christian now. I read in the newspaper all the time you got, and it hit me. And I really felt bad, because I knew deep down you were a good dude, because he hung around me a little bit and we hung out. And he's like, I just knew you were a good hearted dude who had a really hard upbringing. I knew your family. I knew your drunk dad. I just felt bad that, this is what happened to you. But then the next day, I'm on my way to work, he says, and the Holy Spirit came over me and I began to cry. This is crazy, man. He says, I've only felt the Holy Spirit come over me one other time. And that's the moment I gave my life to Christ when I was baptized. And I felt the same power of the Holy Spirit. And I says, I'm on my way to work. Here I am crying and thinking about you. And the Holy Spirit is telling me to support you, to look out for you. I don't even know what that looks like. Is there anything I can do to help you? And I wrote him back and I said, yeah, man, can you send me some money for pens and paper so I can start writing books? I want to start writing books. He said, yeah, sends me $30. I buy 10 tablets of paper and a pack of pens, and I get to writing. A year later, I finished the second draft of my first novel called The Second Chance. It's about these two high school football players. One ends up in prison, one ends up in the NFL, and there's a whole twist. It's a really remarkable story. Really, really good story. Amazing. I sent it to him, Joe, and he reads it because he's like the only friend I got. And my girlfriend still wrote me and sent me a couple bucks. But he reads this book and he says, bro, I cannot believe you wrote this book. This is the best book I've ever read. I cannot believe you wrote this. It is so good. I read it on my way to work. It's just a manuscript in pen. I wrote it in pen. It's a mess. It's like it's chicken scratch. I'm scratching out stuff. I don't even know how to spell that good, bro. Like I'm not even a good speller at the time. I don't even have a dictionary. I don't have a thesaurus. But I do have a good understanding of syntax and structure and story. God blessed me with that gift. So I have a complete, like, advanced understanding of how to write a great story and how to structure it and the syntax and how to write. I just know. I'm not a great speller, but I just know grammar and syntax. I'm perfect with it, right? But the spelling is bad and it's just a mess. He reads it and just says, I don't even notice that. It's just the story is so good. I'm sucked in. I can't believe it. So listen, for the next 5 more years, about every year I send him a book because it takes me about a year to write one of these books. I'm just laying on my bunk. I'm in level 4 where you're locked down like 22 hours a day, 21 and a half hours a day. So I'm just laying there writing all day, every day. Eventually in year 3, my dad writes me. I hadn't talked to him in 5 years. My dad writes me and he says, it's right when I just finished writing my 3rd book, which is my favorite book. It's called The Rat's Tale, Tale. It's about this guy's 2 tours in Vietnam. It's a Vietnam War story, right? And I wrote it to dedicate it to my father, who's a veteran. And so I send it to him, and he reads it. And again, he's blown away. He's like, I can't believe you wrote this. He's like, man, too bad you can't get a typewriter. I said, I can. They're $350. I don't have $350. He's like, I'll buy it. So he buys me a typewriter, and I self-teach myself how to type. And now I start typing my books. So on the 6th year, I finished my 6th novel, which is the Mafia story, To Be a King. And about that time, my friend Billy and this guy Joe, who've been supporting me the whole time, they said, listen, I'm going to start a Facebook page for you. And I don't even know what Facebook is. I don't even really know what it is. I'm just like, Facebook is, what is it? I see it on TV. People talk about it, but it's like a social media thing. Send us some pictures and give us what you want to write as a bio, and we'll create a profile, put your pictures up there. And so I sent him a little bio. It just says, I say that I'm a Christian. I'm serving 13 years in prison for extortion and bank robbery and all these things. And then I said, I write novels. I'm currently just finishing my 6th novel. And I'm happy to have pen pals or anyone want to feel free to write me. Here's how you do it. There's something called JPay, which is a prison email system, and whatever. So my boys start this Facebook page and they're getting friends, requests, and they're following me because Facebook is new and it's novel, and everybody's like, oh yeah, they're following me, and they see I'm in prison and anyways, so they post sample chapters of this book, this To Be a King book, the Mafia book. They post 3-4 sample chapters, and I start getting all this fan mail. Like, people are writing me going, dude, like, you're the next Mario Puzo, bro. Like, that's crazy because Mario Puzo wrote The Godfather. And these people read like 3-4 chapters of my books, and they're calling me the next Mario Puzo. And they're all saying, I read all of Puzo's works. None of them had me as engrossed as this. This is better than Puzo. I'm like, wow, this is crazy. What a compliment. And then one day I get a letter from a girl who says she grew up in my neighborhood. I wouldn't know her. She was raised Muslim, but she's now a Christian, a new Christian, brand new, like a year or 2 old. I wouldn't know her because she was raised Muslim and she wasn't allowed to go out. She wasn't allowed to go to school functions. She wasn't allowed to do anything. Couldn't wear makeup, couldn't do her hair, had to always stay covered. So she was like this nerdy, quiet chick in the corner, like nobody knew. But she was beautiful. That's the crazy thing. She was a beautiful girl. And God kept me from knowing her. She went to my school. We were in the same class of like 90 kids in 8th grade in one hallway of like 6 classrooms. Every day I was in there until I got expelled about 6 months in, passing this girl, and I never saw her and she never saw me. I have no recollection of her. She remembers my name, that I was a bad guy and a drug dealer and I like to fight. Other than that, so she writes me and says, this is crazy. She says, I see you're a Christian. I am too. And I also see you're a writer. Well, I work for a publisher in New York. I work in commercial fiction, she says, but I have friends in, excuse me, she says, I work in academic publishing, but I have friends in commercial fiction. So I'd be willing to read your manuscript. I read the sample chapters. They're really good. I'm really surprised how well they're written, and they're really good. I'd like to read the full manuscript. If it's any good, I'll take it to my friends and maybe we can help you get it published. And I'm like, hallelujah. I'm like, how do I get, this is a miracle. You know what I'm saying? This random girl messages me, right? So I have my friend turn the manuscript, 1,100-page manuscript, into a PDF file, which is a pain in the butt. You got to go to Kinko's and pay like $200 or whatever it was to like turn this huge manuscript in it. But they do it, and he emails it to the girl. She reads the entire book in 3 days on her phone and or iPad. It's the whole thing. 1,100. She writes me a letter and says it's the best book she's ever read. So she writes me and says, I blew through this book. I couldn't put it down. Best book I ever read. It originally said in top 3, but like after I got to know her better, she says, I didn't want to blow up your head. So I said it was in the top 3, but it was the best book I ever read. I just didn't want to say that so you'd think like I was blowing smoke, but it was the best book I ever read. And incredible story. Had me in tears at the end. I was just bawling, and I was just crushed at the end because it's kind of I leave it at an open book ending, so that at the end you don't really know how it resolves. It could go either way. He could be dead. He could be alive. You don't know. And a lot of people think he's dead. And then she wrote me and was crushed. Like the ending really had me. I crushed. All I could do was like scrub my floor, and my roommate's going, "What's wrong with you?" Because she knew she was upset. So I wrote her and be like, "How do you know he's dead?" And then she wrote me back. She's like, "Oh my God, he made my whole week. I can't believe he's alive." Whatever. So, anyways. Her and I, she said, I'm going to help you get published. But then we did some research and found out if I publish the book while I'm in prison and make any money from it, the prison system will take any money and charge me for my stay in prison $40,000 a year. So they'll take like the first $270,000 I make from the book. So we said, let's wait till I get out. She said, agreed. But we became friends and began to write each other back and forth, and found that we had a lot of things in common. We loved the same things. We love the outdoors. We love hiking. We love camping. We love animals. We love food. We just had this cultural background. She was Mediterranean, Lebanese. I'm Sicilian, and we just clicked, man. We were meant to be, and we fell in love over the next year through literally thousands of pages of letters. Literally, I was writing her probably an average of 50 to 70 pages a week, and she was writing me the same. So our letters were passing in the night. And she'd get a letter and read. She said, I could not wait for the mailman to show up. I'd hear the mailman coming around noon. I'd out the window looking. I'd run out there and open the mailbox. And if there's one of your fat letters, she's like, I'd squeal and scream. I'd like take a break from work for an hour, log off work. I could just blow through the whole letter and make notes how I want to write you back. And this went on for like a year. And then she wrote me and said, I think you already know this, but there was some transitioning into like flirting. And then I finally said, we can't do this. We have to draw a line here. And we called The Painted Line, which is the name of the script for the series. But anyways, I said, we need to draw a line, a painted line. We can't do this. I've got 6.5 years left in prison. You're a professional. You have a life. You don't have any kids. You have a beautiful existence. I don't want to ruin it. She said, I agree. Then the flirting. And then like 2 letters later, we're back to kind of innuendos and a little bit of flirting just to be funny, because we're both writers. And she's a writer too. She's written a couple of books. And then she just wrote me. She said, I've fallen in love with you, and I'm willing to wait 20 years. She says, I think you're worth it. And I said, could you wait faithfully? She says, I absolutely can. I said, well, then move up north by my dad and look out for him. And she's like, where? I'm like, in the middle of the wilderness. I want to be I want to be able to go 4-wheeling and trout fishing and just be away. I don't want to be around people anymore. I spent the first 29 years in and around Detroit, surrounded by people. I saw a lot of bad stuff. I'm scared of the city. I'm scared of the city because I'm scared of what somebody might make me do in response. You see what I'm saying? I'm scared of how I might respond to the wrong kind of confrontation. These days, there's a lot of like keyboard warriors and keyboard gangsters, and people make up lies about me. They just make up stuff. I get it all the time. Haters, they just make stuff up or take things out of context. Maybe one of those people see me in real life and say the wrong thing, and I react wrong, and then I end up back in prison. I don't want to be around people. Put me in the woods. So she did. She moved way up to the wilderness of northern Michigan, got us a house, waited the next 7 years, 6.5 years. And then I got out in 2016 of July on a beautiful, hot summer day. And my boys drove me. She prepared us a feast. 4 of my boys were waiting when I walked out of prison. They took me to breakfast. 2 of them went on their day, and 2 of them drove me. One of them was Joe, the guy who the Holy Spirit came over, and one of them was my boy Billy. He's been like one of my best friends my whole life since high school. A very like legendary dude from the neighborhood, like my neighborhood. He's a legend, the guy, and he's a Calvin Klein model, just super handsome guy, and he's a legendary dude. But he's my boy. All through prison, he'd send me money. I wouldn't ask for it, and he would be like, "Do you need money?" I said, "No." How much do you need? Just give me a number. I'm like, I'm not asking for nothing. So he just like send me $300 every couple months. I'm just like, here, man. If you need shoes, you need that. But I'd never asked nobody for nothing. Never did. Not nobody. Not even my girl. She once I became engaged to my wife, she'd send me money, more money than I needed. We spent probably about $1,000 a month on the phone. And that's how great, expensive it was. And but I mean, it kept us close. It built our relationship. Once we still wrote letters, by the way. We still write 20, 30 pages of letters, but we still talk on the phone twice a day, 2-3 times a day for like half an hour. But anyways, that guy Joe, the day after I got out, I went to the courthouse down in this little tiny town of Rogers City. It's just a little town of probably 1,500 people. Beautiful town, right on Lake Huron, the Great Lake Huron, beautiful lake. And I got married. I married Maria, and then we went straight to this remote, secluded wilderness park, this beach. And that guy Joe, do you remember he said he'd only felt that Holy Spirit come over him when he got baptized? I said, when I get out, I want you to baptize me and Maria. So he said, I'm not an ordained minister. I said, I don't care. God, God approves of you. And so he says, okay. So we went to this beautiful beach. There was 95 degrees that day, really hot. The water was like bath water, crystal clear turquoise, calm and flat for miles. The lake, as far as the eye could see to the horizon, just this flat, beautiful turquoise water. Look, you could be in like Tahiti or something. And he baptized me. And I remember him saying, why do you want to be baptized in Christ? And I said, because when I hit that water, when I come up, I want to be clean. The old me is dead. The old me is washed clean and gone. And when I come up out of that water, it's the new me, a man of Christ. And my wife did the same. And it was very emotional. We were all teary-eyed, and then like they had to get going, and I just wanted to swim. Like I'm in the lake, just swim and backpack swimming. I'm like, I was in prison the day before. I was in a prison cell and been there for 13 years. You know how hot it is in prison when it's 95 degrees, bro? It's like an oven, man. It's 110 degrees in there, and you're dying. You got this little cheap fan, and it's just horrible. And the next day, I'm swimming in this beautiful 80-degree water. It's perfectly cool. I mean, I don't want to get out of the water, man. Like I just want, and they're like, so then they took me to dinner. They bought me a gym membership, by the way. There turned out there was a little gym in town. So they paid a year gym membership for me because I'm a workout guy. And then they took me out to this amazing meal. But by the way, the night before, my wife made me an incredible meal of oxtails, a turkey, pecan pie, cheesecake, grilled asparagus, and a mixed green salad. That's what I asked for. And then she made it up. And it was amazing. But the next day when we went out, they took me to this amazing restaurant in Sheboygan, Michigan, which is way up by the bridge. If you're in Michigan, you get, up here is where I live. I live in this top part. And I was really nervous about ordering because the food was expensive. I was like, like a sirloin wrapped in bacon or whatever it was, a medallion was like $26. I'm like, oh my God, that's so much. That's how much money I made in a month in prison. And I'm like, but I wanted the walleye too, right? And they're like, get it both, bro. And I'm like, dude, that's like $50. Like, get it, man. You know? And so they hooked me up with this amazing meal. I'll never forget it. And then the next day I started my life, and then 9 months later I published To Be a King, and it did really well. Like for a self-published book with no marketing budget and no marketing experience, no knowledge of how to market a book, and plus the market being flooded at the time with self-published, really crappy self-published books. It was the transition from traditional publishing to the vanity publishing. So
Right.
everybody and their brother was publishing these crappy books, and it's still like that to this day. Millions and millions of books. And my book was the needle in the haystack. And we did some marketing, and some people bought it. Like, it did good. It made the top 100 in its genre a couple times. It cracked the top 50. And it just, people were calling us the next Godfather. I got crazy reviews. I got amazing 5-star reviews, a couple hundred of them, like 300 between the two books. And everybody, the reviews are so good on the book that people think they're fake. I've seen people on social media go, and these guys got fake reviews. Nobody's reviews are that good. And I'm like, that's a hell of a compliment. You know what I'm saying? But I mean, it is what it is. I don't even know how to fake a review, but all I can say is read them. You know what I'm saying? If you read them for yourself, you decide. And people do. I have had people say that. I had another author want to do a review swap. And I'm like, bro, I don't do review swaps. Like, I'm not going to give you a review and you give me a good review. If I read your book and it sucks, I'm going to say the book sucks. He's like, no, I'll give you a good review. I said, no. He's like, I looked at reviews. There's no way that those aren't fake. There's a review swap. I'm like, they're all real. I've never done a review swap. He's like, yeah, sure, bro. How? I said, I wrote a good book. Read the book. So he reads the book, and like 2 weeks later, he comes back and goes, bro, I just finished both books. He's like, I get it now. He's like, you're the master, man. I get it. But anyway, so here I am.
Well, we threw the script out for this show. I normally have this format, and I just got to share one of the comments here. Here we go. Gunner's stories are so mesmerizing, even Wade hasn't got a word in. But it's not like that. It's not like me wanting to try to get a word in. It has mesmerizing, and your story is so jam-packed. And your enthusiasm, it is mesmerizing. And it's just been such an honor to have you on the show. We have blown through the whole time, and I feel like we scratched the surface. I got you going to tell us about your story, about your life. And, we uncorked the wine and out it came.
Yeah, I mean, when I do interviews, I like the scripts out the window usually with me. But I do want to talk about a little about what I'm doing now, if you don't mind.
Yeah, please. I do have to wrap it up, though. I personally have to go. We often go overtime, so it's not a big deal. But tell us, we're going to have you back on. But tell us briefly, obviously. Well, tell us briefly what it is you're doing now and what's next for you.
Well, so now I live in the middle of nowhere in northern Michigan, out in the wilderness, is my paradise. When I'm not working, I'm trout fishing or deer hunting, bow hunting usually. But right now, I started a company called White Pine Publishing and Consulting LLC, and what I do is I'm a publisher, but not, and I guess you could say a self-publisher. But I'm much different than like most self-publishers. I'm a developmental editor and the publisher. So basically, people bring me their manuscripts, and I look at it, and I evaluate it, I assess it, and go, "This is what's bad. This is what could be better. This is what you need. This is how you can fix it." And I basically take their book and make it really good. And that aspiring authors need that. And then that's the only way to be successful as an author. Like, if you try to write a book on your own without coaching or some kind of like successful, established, and talented editor, you're going to fail. That's it. It's just like if you decided to be a heart surgeon tomorrow and you just showed up in the scrubs and you're like, all right, look out, I'm going to do surgery today. And like, you would make a mess. You'd probably kill people, and people will think you're a lunatic, right? Well, it's the same thing if you decide, I'm just going to write a book and hope it's good, and I'm going to hope it's a great story and people are going to like it and it's going to resonate. It's not. You're going to fail. So you need to hire someone like me or whatever. So people come to me and hire me, and I help them deliver really amazing books. And I ghostwrite books. That's really my bread and butter, where people come to me and say, this is my life story. I have this remarkable story, but I don't have time or the talent to write my story and make it a great book. So they hire me, and they, pay me a, good living wage to to write their stories. It's pretty amazing. I write some amazing stories, and I paid well for it, and I enjoy it. It's a gift. So that's what I do today.
So White Pine Publishing, is that one word?
No, it's White Pine Publishing and Consulting. But if you go to our website, it's whitepinepublishing.com.
Okay.
So if you go to whitepinepublishing.com, if you could put that up, it'd be great. And you can get a free consultation with me. I basically tell me your story, your goals, your plans, and what you want and what you're trying to do. And I'll tell you the best way to accomplish those goals and how to achieve it. I do book assessments. I charge $750, and I give you my notes when I'm done. It takes 3-4 days to slowly read it and assess the book. I make notes of what's good, what's bad, what needs improvement, how you can improve it. And then I give you the notes and tell you what to do. And then you can use that $750 if you decide to get a publishing package with me. You can apply that $750 to the publishing packages. And so it's kind of a rebate. Or maybe if you just want coaching, that too, I do straight coaching, or just editing. If you just want professional editing, which is super important, then you can hire me to do that too. And so other than that, I have a documentary dropping this late this summer, and that should be very cool. But that's what I'm doing. I have 2 new novels coming out, by the way. One is a dystopian political thriller, which will be really good. Does have a kind of a Christian lean, a conservative Christian lean. And then another book called Snowman Chronicles about 2 huge cocaine smugglers, the biggest in the world. One of them is in jail, and he's writing the story from jail. He also becomes a Christian while he's in jail, and he's telling his story as a form of redemption to keep people from going down the wrong path like he did. But so it's both books kind of have a little bit of a Christian undertone, which is what I want to phase my writing into for now. And so so there's that. That's what I got going on.
Awesome. Well, let me ask one question sort of to conclude and try to put a little bit of a wrapper on this amazing wild ride. And that is when we talk about stories, and we started here with your own creation story, we got a little bit into your family background, some of the forces that shaped you. What is it? I mean, and when we think about the Bible, it is story after story after story after story. And it's like an onion, because these stories, they all layer into each other. Like one of my favorites is, and a lot of people haven't thought of this, but the serpent in the Garden of Eden can whisper. It can influence. It has no power. It's got no arms and legs. Right. It can slither and it can whisper. And it influences simply by asking questions. Did God say that you're not allowed to eat any of the trees here? It implies these whispering things.
Right.
But that serpent, by the time the book is over, by the time you get to the book of Revelation, you now have a dragon. And the way in which the serpent becomes a dragon is it influences enough people that they form groups of people, they form tribes, they form city-states, and eventually they form nations. And people give political power to the evil whisperings of the serpent, and it becomes a dragon. Yeah. And it's a destructive, fire-breathing, rampaging force, right? Yeah. So when we think about the story of stories, right, the Bible itself, what is it that makes a good story, and what is it that makes your life a good story, a story worth living, and a story that is a prelude to what will come next?
Well, in the Bible, not compare my life to the Bible in any way, but I will say my life, your life, all of our lives is really the story of your life. There's one purpose. There's 2 purposes. Excuse me. One is to pass or fail. Will you go to heaven? You have to pass. In order to pass that test, you have to believe in Jesus and submit your life to God and Jesus. That's it. But now, what do you do with your story? How do you change the lives of others? Your Great Commission. That's what I'm saying. So as you're writing your story, you have a choice. You can write it in many ways. I could write it in a way that I'm selfish and self-centered, and I don't give my resources or time to anybody. Or I can write my story in a way that I give 90% of my resources to the needy and Christian, and I spend time, sharing my testimony like I am here, or feeding the poor at the soup kitchen, or whatever. You have the choice in how to write your own story. Will you write a good story for God and Jesus, or will you write a self-centered, selfish, narcissistic story? We know if you write that story, how it's going to end, and it's not going to be good. And even if you do make it to heaven, you got to face God. You're going to have to face God and Jesus with this story of narcissism, and you're not going to be rewarded the way you could have been. So I'm one of those people, like, write your story, be good, be kind, be generous, be honest, give, and always put people before you, everybody, because that's what God says. Love God with all your heart, mind, and soul. That should be unsaid and go first. He created everything, including you and the breath in your lungs. Second, he said, love thy neighbor as you love yourself. Love, which means I love myself. I want to, but I love people. I want to serve people. Like that's the goal, in my opinion. The answer to your question is serve others with everything you got, whether it's words, your testimony, money, resources, whatever it is. Give, because there's no greater reward in life than giving. Getting doesn't give you a reward. Somebody gives you a Lamborghini, you drive it. Oh, this is fun. Thank you. That's cool. But if you take that money and you sell that Lamborghini and you have $300,000 and you find a bunch of people, 10, 20, 30 people who are in desperate need of help. They need a new car. They need their house paid off. They need education. Or maybe they have a great idea for a business, but no seed money. And I can give them the 50 grand they need. And that starts a generational wealth that changes the entire future of their entire bloodline. And I say, by the way, Christ, Jesus led me to you, and he gives you this money, not me. He did. I'm just the vessel. Now, when they take that money and make a multi-million-dollar business out of it, and they tell their kids, look what Jesus did for me. This dude, when I needed it more than anything else, came to me, just gave me the money and said, Jesus did this for me. And it changed an entire future of our family. Now we live comfortably. Now we are able to donate money to charity. Now we get to do things we love. We're not struggling. We're not stressed out. We're not depressed. All because one guy decided, you know what? I don't need a Lamborghini. I'm perfect. I'm happier and have a much greater reward with taking that money and giving it to someone else. The feeling of reward of giving that person in need money or help is far greater than driving around in a Lamborghini for 20 minutes going, look at me. You know what I'm saying? Because that's all it is. It's look at me. And when you put it in the garage and you're done, the feeling's gone. Nobody's looking at you. And most of the people who do look at you in that Lamborghini, they think you're a douchebag, because they're like, why would you waste all that money on a car? All the people you could help, all the things you could do good in the world, and you bought a car so you could drive around going, look at me. Anyways, that's hopefully answer your question.
That absolutely does. Thank you so much, Gunnar. It's just been amazing. I have one thing left to do today, and that's to show the sneak peek for next week's show. I don't know how we're going to follow this up. It has just been an honor, and it's been an amazing ride and journey to have you share your story with the audience tonight. So, Gunnar, thank you for being you despite everything you've been through. Thank you for openly and honestly just sharing it, the Holy Spirit, the love of God that pours forth despite all those trials and tribulations. It's just amazing to see. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you. My last message is, don't judge the book by its cover. No pun intended. All I'm saying is that nobody's beyond redemption. No matter how bad they are or how bad things they've done or whatever, nobody is beyond redemption. God works miracles and moves mountains. And you could have somebody who's the worst human being possible. Yeah. That guy can end up being a saint.
I talked about the serpent and the dragon. The other thing we know about that being, that entity, that concept, is Satan is the accuser of the brethren, right?
That's right.
Jesus is the forgiver.
That's right.
And God is the forgiver. Satan is the accuser. So amen to what you just said.
That's right. Nobody's beyond redemption. Remember that.
Amen. So with that, thank you, Gunnar. We're going to go to the sneak peek, and everybody will see you next week. Same time, same place, 8 p.m. Central, for Created in the Image of God.
By the way, God bless, and follow me on YouTube, my Gunnar Detroit, my YouTube channel, or my author page, author Gunnar Alan Lindbloom on Facebook. Thank you.
Yeah. So say those one more time, and maybe I can type it and leave it here in the chat at the end.
subscribe to my YouTube channel. I do a lot of outdoors stuff, fishing and stuff.
And what is the YouTube channel? Just your name?
Gunner Detroit. Yeah, Gunner Detroit, or my name, either or will pop it up. Gunner Detroit on YouTube, at YouTube, or at Gunner Detroit on YouTube. And then my author page I'm maxed out on my personal Facebook page, so it's worthless. But my author page is author Gunner Allen Lindbloom, and so you could follow me there and stuff. And also or you could go to my website, Gunner Detroit, which is my website.com, Gunner Detroit.
Awesome.
Or you could always contact me if you need publishing things, through White Pine Publishing and Consulting.
WhitePinePublishing.com.
Yep.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Gunner.
You're welcome, man.
And here we go with the sneak peek for next week's show. Until then, everyone, may God be with you.
God bless.
Hey, everyone, it's Wade Franson. I am back in the studio with a sneak peek of episode 159, airing on July 15th, with Jerry Tostowarek, who hails from Canada. And while this show is airing near Independence Day, we're going to have a Canadian on the show. And this man is unique. We've had him on the show in our dim antiquity before we started really keeping track of exactly who was on. We counted episodes, but not who. So he was in one of the first 30 episodes, I believe. But we have him back because he's now in semi-retirement. He's just completed his first novel. His passion, however, is what he's doing with that time, which is studying into philosophy and ethics. After having spent most of his life in real estate up in Canada, 9 years teaching ethics as one of the premier ethics instructors in the field of real estate in Canada. Welcome to the studio, Jerry.
Wade, thank you very much. I'm really looking forward to our discussion.
Well, so am I, because the topic is near and dear to my heart, the independent investigation of reality. And does philosophy have a role? If so, what, how? And so the first question I have for you, and I'm going to give you, 30 to 45 seconds to answer this age-old question. How does one independently investigate reality, and what role does philosophy play?
Oh, such a great question, Wade. And in 2,000 years, we haven't been able to answer that question, but I get 30 seconds. I should nail it. And that is really the $68,000 question, because really there's three main groups, I guess you'd call them, that investigate reality. There's science, there's philosophy, and there's theology or religious investigation into reality. And they bump up against each other a lot, but often we find some of them in every field, and all three of them coming in with preconceived notions, sometimes preconceived beliefs, which really, as human beings, is I guess only natural, but it affects. When we're investigating anything, we should be going in with an open mind, looking for the facts. But quite often we don't. And so that really affects, and has for 2,000 years, has affected actually more than 2,000, as we'll get into in the show, has really affected that investigation into reality. And I guess has led to no conclusions yet.
Well, we'll try to draw some, minimal conclusions, or at least road signs. One of the ways in which we're going to get there is diving a little bit into your own experience, because I can imagine, having spent so much time in real estate, large transactions, people's life's savings involved, and the proclivity perhaps to try to maybe not disclose certain things about the real estate that's being sold, despite reams of forced disclosures, right? There's a lot of effort made to provide transparent information and make those transactions ethical and equitable. But we all know that the reason for regulations is to try to force that behavior, which maybe doesn't come natural, because the natural proclivity is more self-preservation, selfishness, and thus these biases take deep root and deep hold. So has your work in that field impacted why and how you perhaps are really spending your semi-retirement in this field?
That's such a great question, Wade. And I hadn't given it deep thought until about, 10 seconds ago. I had thought about it somewhat, and it certainly has affected me in this regard. And in fact, it was a central question for about the 10 or 15 years when I was, well, actually up over in its entirety, 20 some years when I was instructing the industry, but the last 10 to 12 years where I was heavily involved in ethics, where we constantly, there was give and take from less ethical and more ethical standpoints. And so that's a long way of saying, yeah, it's played a big role, and really, it's really brought out a lot of thought-provoking in my mind. Not if I said that right. It's provoked a lot of thought in my mind in regards to ethics and philosophy and reality and what's the good. So yeah, long way of saying it's played a big part.
Well, and we will dive into it both theoretically and also from a rubber meets the road perspective, as you can already tell from this sneak peek. So you're not going to want to miss episode 159 of Creating the Image of God with Jerry Tostowarek, which will be airing on July 15th at 8 p.m. Central. I would encourage, with all that is available to me, ethically insist that you show up for that show. We'll see you then.